Welcome to the Good News Spectacular. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. The Good News Spectacular takes you up close and personal with people and events in the journey we call life, from birth to death and beyond. Sometimes the journey of life is filled with joy, happiness, prosperity, and peace. Other times the journey of life can be filled with pain, anxiety, and fear. God never promised the journey would always be smooth. Quite the contrary. God said there will be difficult times in the journey of life. But for those who choose to believe, God also promised to be with us in the journey. On tonight's show, we're going to try and answer the questions you've asked us. Is there a God? What does He want with me? How can I have a relationship with Him? Why do so many bad things happen if there's a God? I don't see any difference between the people who go to church and those who don't. How could anyone love me with all the mistakes I've made in my life? You will want to stay tuned because I have a feeling tonight's show is going to be a very interesting one. So we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. I'm Doug Thompson with co-host Roger Thompson. Today's show, we've received a number of questions, Roger, from people that have emailed us because for whatever reason this series on the Good News Spectacular has really touched a nerve for a lot of people. You recall we started out with the near-death experiences and started with the one that you had at Enid Speedway. And that took us on into Don Piper and the 90 Minutes in Heaven and Bill Weiss's 23 Minutes in Hell, and we had Howard Storm. Then we did a follow-up where we answered questions about the near-death experiences. And then we did the show with Marvin and Joyce Long, who had lost not only one child, but two children, their grandson, and their two great-grandchildren at the tornado in Joplin. And married 61 years, just wonderful, absolutely wonderful people. And so then we moved on to the mini stock miracle. And the theme of all of these is just like it sounds. It's Good News Spectacular, how the Lord's worked in people's lives. And so we've received a number of questions, and we'll just tackle the questions head on. The first one that we got in was, how do I know there is a God?
Well, for one thing, somebody is pretty well organized going back thousands of years, and we have writings from various people there. I personally don't have a problem with it because I visited him pretty closely in 1971. And that reminds me, just recently on television, there was can't remember now exactly who it was, but there was a lady, a doctor, I think, that did not believe there was a God and had a out-of-body experience. And she described it as, I'd always had trouble with describing this light, and she described it as a room filled up with light, but it has no walls, and there's no end to it. And she was just really taken back by it, and several things that she said was the same thing that other people have said. She said, I did not want to go back there. Mm-hmm. I resented my family when I went back there, and it was very difficult for her to adjust to it because she did not want to be where she came back to life, And it was a moving experience. It was about a 30-minute show, I think, that she did. But I don't think you can look around the earth or the universe and determine that all of this happened by chance or an explosion of some planet or something. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's the first thing that I tell people. I say I even remember as being a third or a fourth grader, and you remember back in those days it was a situation where they said, well, we evolved from living in the ocean, came onto the shore, and then life developed from there. That's the land shore. And I remember the first time hearing that in class, and I just laughed, and I was third or fourth grade. I said, are you serious? Are you serious? You think we were all in an ocean and flopped up on the shore and then started walking and developed like what we did here? How can you even think that? And it was amazing to me, and anytime I hear those types of things, it's amazing to me because to me it's just so crystal clear, it's so obvious. Within everybody, there's that feeling, I think, that God's always reaching out to you and reaching for you, and you know that, and you can suppress it. You can be a bad person for a while, you can suppress it, you can do those things, but He's always right there. And in those moments you say, am I happy with the way I'm going? Is this the way that it should be? And he's always there. You know it whether or not you've had an out-of-body experience, or you've heard Howard Storm or Don Piper or any of the others talk about their experiences about what they actually see. Or in my own case with the mini-stock miracle. All of those things, he's there. You can have that relationship with him. I know he's there. It's just like if I'm standing over here by a curtain and there's somebody on the other side and I'm talking to him. Do I know the person's on the other side? Well, I can't see him, but I hear him and I know he's there. But if somebody said, did you see him? I didn't see him. And that's kind of the way that it seems to me.
I suspect that you're missing the age when you first thought about that, because when you were probably 5 years old, we used to go down to Emmanuel Baptist and learn all of those Bible verses, so that if we learned enough of them, they'd send us to camp in Hutchinson where they had those big black water bugs.
Yeah, that was a reward.
Yeah, that was our reward. But anyway, we were much younger than that, because I think I was about a second grader then.
Yeah, you're probably right. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Doug Thompson with co-host Roger Thompson. We're going through a series of questions that viewers have sent to us about religion, and they're good questions, and we picked out the best of the questions to work with, and the ones that we'll have some chance of answering anyway. The second question is why...
Are we done with the first one?
Yeah, we finished the first one. We'll have
well,
to.
There's a couple things I want to say about the first one.
Okay.
Albert Einstein was an honorable mention for being a bright fella.
Yeah, he was.
And
couldn't comb his hair and didn't know how to dress.
No, well, he wore the same thing.
Pretty much like me. You're leaving the house looking like that?
Yeah, wore the same clothes every day. And another guy that was a well-known atheist until just before his death was W.C. Fields.
Is that right?
Yes, W.C. was an atheist, and one of his buddies caught him reading the Bible just shortly before he died, and said, "W.C., what are you doing reading the Bible?" And he says, "Insurance." And W.C. died when he was on New Year's Day, when he was about...
Christmas
was
Day.
It Christmas Day?
I remember that
65,
part.
But
yeah, 1948.
Yeah, 48.
Okay.
Okay.
The next question is, why Christianity with Jesus and God as opposed to some other religion? Well, for me, that's an easy one to answer.
Good, answer it.
Okay, I will. Why Christianity with Jesus and God? Here's the first one. The other religions that, at least that I'm familiar with, their God has moved on, and you don't see him. He didn't have any resurrection. He didn't have a period of time where he walked back on this earth and over 500 people saw him. In Jesus' case, Jesus said in advance, here's everything that's going to happen. And it did happen. And then after he was crucified in front of everybody and stripped naked and crucified, put into the ground, and he had already told them before, he said, 3 days later, I will arise. And he did so. Over 500 people saw him. They don't even refute that. Their explanation for it is, well, he wasn't really dead. There was something that they did with chemical or something, and he wasn't really dead, so that happened. The other part of the Romans tried to explain somebody stole the body. Well, that's laughable, because the Roman guarded the tomb.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to be overran by some peasants with sticks. And that didn't happen. And so over 500 people, all of his disciples saw him. And those people, then, if it wasn't true, they wouldn't have went out and sacrificed their lives for something that wasn't true. So that part is what is distinguishable to me in regards to Christianity, because he said, I live. And he said, I'll return again. And I believe he'll return again. And when he says, if you let me live in you, then you can live in me. And I think I have seen enough of those, not only in my own readings with the Bible, but from people like yourself, like Don Piper, Howard Storm, that was an atheist, and all of those people said, I crossed over. I've seen the other side, and there is another side. And you can accept it, you can reject it. But to me, that's the only religion where the God said, I will sacrifice myself for you. And you take God's situation, we're parents. And so you take a situation you said, if I was to take one of my kids and say, I'm going to send my kid somewhere, and I'm going to have that kid who's going to be perfect within that environment that he goes into or she goes into, and then I'm going to have them beat him, treat him the way they did, strip them naked, crucify them, throw them into the ground. I'm going to do that because he's the only one or she's the only one who can pay the price for all of those debts. Now to me, that's a God that absolutely loves us, because it isn't one, you give to me, you serve me, you do these things. This is one who said, I love you so much, I'm going to send my own son who's without sin and have these things done, because he's the only one that can pay the price for you. And if he won't go do it and won't pay the price, then you don't have any hope. And he said, Jesus said, I'll do it. I'll pay the price. And he did so. He willingly went. Those Romans couldn't have taken him. They couldn't have done anything. And I think during the crucifixion, or shortly before, he had said, I could call 10,000 legions of angels to come down. But he knew that wasn't what he was instructed to do, what he agreed to do, and what he had to do. So he could have done all of those things. And I can't think of a situation where, I can't think of how anybody else could have done what he did, because first, they weren't in the situation. Second, they didn't have the qualifications. And third, they could not have endured what he endured.
No, he took on the human form, and he came back, and all the humiliation and the pain and everything, he felt just like a human did,
yeah.
and did it willingly.
And did it willingly, and he told the people multiple times when they confronted him, he said, tell me, show me, have somebody explain to me one sin that I've done. And they could never challenge it. And you know, once he got to be known, he had followings of thousands because he was healing, and naturally that would attract anybody. And so people in groves came just to be near him, just to see what he would do, just to touch him, just to get a blessing from him. And the Romans also sent people, and so did the church. The Sanhedrin sent spies out, and so they would watch to see what he was doing. And they never once were able to show that he didn't do what it appeared he did. If he made somebody who was blind to see, they couldn't come back and say, well, that was a trick. You know, that was a friend from so and so else. They all knew him. Like the crippled fellow that was laying at the temple. They knew him. They had known him his whole life that he couldn't walk. Jesus, get up. You know, the blind that he said, what do you want me to do? And he said, restore my sight. And Jesus didn't assume that's what he wanted him to do, because he may have had something else. Jesus restores his sight. They knew it. They were all miracles.
Sure.
And so their contention against Jesus was, well, you do these by Satan,
yeah.
not by the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, that's ridiculous. And just like Jesus said, a house divided against itself can't stand. So that's my theory behind it. We're going to take another break. I can't believe we've already used up another segment, but we'll take a break. We'll be right back. Today's Moment of Wisdom brought to you by the Kansas Auto Racing Museum in Chapman. And now for today's Moment of Wisdom, here's our host. There are three kinds of people you will meet in life. The first is the critic. They're the first to point an accusing finger and the last to extend a helping hand. The second is the cautious. When you're in trouble, they distance themselves from you so they don't become tainted by your perceived liabilities. These people are not bad, they're just self-serving. Don't put your trust in them. The third is the committed. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born from adversity. Recognize such people and build your life around them, because they are a gift from God. Build, develop, and sustain your relationship with God. Associate with equally yoked people and cultivate a relationship with the committed. Thanks for listening to this Moment of Wisdom. Today's Moment of Wisdom brought to you by the Kansas Auto Racing Museum in Chapman. Welcome back to the Good News Spectacular. We're fielding some questions that have been sent to us about religion, why Christianity, why God, why Jesus. Roger, I want to go back to something that you were saying just a little bit ago when you were talking about W.C. Fields. And I remember back when we were in grade school, our school teacher, a young fellow by the name of Gene Plank, and he had a family, multiple kids, I don't know, seemed like 5 or so, maybe at the time. And I remember sitting in class one day, and we were at lunch, and somebody asked him about religion. And they said, do you believe that there is a God? And Gene said, yes, I do. And he said, well, what if you're wrong? And Gene took just 15 seconds looking at the kid, and he said, well, you know, here's the way I look at it is, if I believe in Jesus and I believe in God, and I live my life accordingly, then I've been a better man for my family and for my wife, for my community. And he said, if it turns out I'm wrong, then he said, how have I been harmed by that? But if I go the other direction and I say, it hasn't been proven to me that there is one, so why should I believe in a God? And it turns out that I get to the other end, and there is a God, I can't fix that mess that I've created. I'm done. And I'll be living elsewhere, which he meant hell. Probably didn't use the word in those days. And I thought that was as good of an answer as I have heard, because I was listening to Ravi Zachariah the other day on the radio, and I suppose that's what triggered that, because somebody in the audience asked him almost an identical question, and Ravi's answer was almost identical to what Gene Plank had said. Well, I think Ravi Zachariah is just absolutely fantastic, and we always thought a lot of Gene Plank, and I hope he's still living. But I
saw him here several years ago, but I'm sure he probably is still living, because I did not know this till I visited with him a few years ago. He is only 10 years older than we are. And he didn't, in those days, remember that was a one-room schoolhouse with every grade from 1st to 8th in there. And he did an excellent job teaching us all, and the guy was barely 20 years old.
Yeah,
it's
I knew
incredible.
He was young.
Yeah, and no, Gene was, he was quite made quite an impression on all of the kids that was in that little school, and did a terrific job, and was always very thankful for the little bit of support that he had. I mean, like he talked about Clarence and Bud Adams, you know, anytime he needed something, they would go down and put in a concrete pad for a basketball court, or if he needed help moving the kids around for softball games. But he truly believed what he said.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, he did.
Was a wonderful guy.
Yeah,
still.
I saw him again when I went to Emporia State and started down there to Emporia, and I was playing football, and somehow or another he was around there, and we ran into each other, and he says, "You remember me?" And I looked at him and I said, "Gene Plank?" And he said, "Yeah."
Oh, you'd never call him Gene in those days.
Well, no, I called him his full name then, but no, I wouldn't have called him Gene.
Mr. Plank.
Mr. Plank. But he wasn't a disciplinarian. He was just earned the respect that he got. And so I saw him, and he had heard my name. So, you know, when he came up, he said, "Are you the same one from?" Because, you know, when he saw me, kind of like the deal with, you know, you're going to go back to your third grade class reunion. Well, I'm not. I put on 150 pounds. I'm not going back. You know, so that was kind of the same thing. Gene knew me as a little kid. Now, he said, "What I remember about you is you was incredibly fast." Didn't say anything about me being smart or anything else. He said, because I ran a lot of track and their stuff. But he was teaching
faster.
Psychology at the time. Yeah.
A lot faster.
No, you weren't.
I was.
No, you weren't. Okay, the next question we've got is, I've made such a mess out of my life, no one and nothing could help me. I hear that a lot. You just mentioned an example of it with W.C. Fields. And the good part about with the religion is God will take you anytime. He will take you on the deathbed. And I know I have heard people say, well, I'm going to live just the life I want to live, do what I want to do when I want to do it. And then on my deathbed, I'm going to make that change, that transition. Well, it doesn't work that way, and many times you never even get the chance to be able to do it.
Well, I mean, if it's insincere, it's not going to work anyway.
No, it's not. You're exactly right. It'll be just like what Jesus said, "I never knew you." And the reason being is you never had a relationship with me. It's a little more than just calling out my name. It's like I say to people, I said, you know, Satan knows Scripture way better than any of us will know Scripture, because he knows the Scripture. That's his life. That's what he does, is try to counter the things that the Lord wants to do. And if you don't have that relationship with God, then it's extremely difficult. But you can always make and acquire and get that relationship at any time. You agree?
Yes, I do.
The next one is, I know people who go to church and they do all the bad things the rest of us do, so why bother with church? Now that's one I hear quite a bit too, don't you?
I guess that's kind of the hypocrite rule there, isn't it,
Yeah,
or something? That
yeah,
was
yep.
from days of old. That's what they'd say, that
Yeah.
behind everyone's back, and it made you wonder sometimes
Well,
if, you talk about, look who's in church and look what they did, and everybody's, yeah, I know that saying.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. And when that one comes up, why I tell people, I said, look, because they go to church doesn't make them in that relationship with the Lord. Those doors are open. Anybody can go into church and they can sit down, and you don't. In my opinion, you don't have to go to church to have that relationship with the Lord. It is, in fact, a relationship. There are people who never set their foot into church and have a wonderful relationship with the Lord because they may be in prison, they may be at sea, they may be in some setting where they never had that opportunity, but I think it's all right here. And it kind of goes back to what you said when you were going through the near-death experiences, and what the others have said is, I didn't audibly have to communicate with Jesus. We were thought to thought.
Right.
And I think that's exactly the way that it is, too, when you have that relationship, when you really get into it and dedicate the time and study the Word and then give Him the opportunity to respond. So many times, and I do it myself. I'm not singling anybody else out except myself. I'll do prayer, and then I'll say, okay, now I'm done, and I'll get up and leave. And I never give the time. Sometimes I don't give the time for the response to where He answers me. And I'm sure that's my fault entirely. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Good News Spectacular. I'm Roger. This is my brother Doug Thompson. We've been going through this series of questions about the existence of God, about out-of-body experiences. I'm glad we've done this show, Doug, because from the start, with all the people that came in and talked about their near-death experiences, it generated questions from other people, tough questions.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we covered it. I'm glad we were able to go through some of these questions, and it makes me think, but what's more importantly, it makes people who have not considered the existence of God and what our programs have been about. And now these questions, and I hope we've made a difference in some folks' lives.
Boy, I hope so too. And we know this, that the good Lord uses ordinary people like us to be able to plant the seed, and from there He'll nurture it and it will go. And if you're sitting at home and you're watching this, you can find a Bible, pick up a Bible, read, and enjoy it. That's how it all starts. Thanks for watching Good News Spectacular.